Do you have a story to share with the world? Of course you do. We all have stories to share. An Anchor podcast allows you to share your interests in a way that connects to others all across the globe. If you have been considering starting your own podcast and don't know where to begin, Anchor makes it easy to record, edit, and publish with the click of a button. You can even add music. Whether it's crime dramas, self-improvement, paranormal adventures, or tips about parenting, you too can share your unique imprint on the world. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. You've got this. I believe in you. Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. I am really excited about the guests that I have on today. So I have done a few podcasts myself on how to energetically disconnect from the matrix. I've done a few EFT tapping scripts on how to reprogram the subconscious mind. But today I have a guest on who's actually written a book about this. I have Victor Manzo with me today. He is a former pediatric chiropractor and energy medicine practitioner who is now a business mindset coach, author, and speaker. And he is the author of Decoding the Matrix. Welcome, Victor. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this convo.
Absolutely. So let's dive right into this. So first of all, what is the Matrix and how have you decoded the Matrix to transform your life?
Ooh, loaded question.
Yeah, two loaded questions.
That is loaded. Decoding the Matrix, it's really, I always, as I share in my book, it's if we just change the name of Matrix to human collective consciousness, that's really what it is. And for those who may not know, that's just the thoughts, the emotions, and we're taking all the humans, averaging them all out, their thoughts, emotions, and what they focus on. And that creates an experience, and I call it the Matrix because what that does is it gives an experience to humanity. Now, it doesn't mean that that's good or bad, because a lot of times, especially when I was going through my learning energy medicine and all this kind of stuff, we'd be like, oh, you got to escape the Matrix and all this other things. And I always felt like they were making it feel like it was a bad thing.
Absolutely.
But then I learned over time that I'm like, every species, every animal, every planet, solar system, universe, it all has its own matrix in a sense. And so it's just looking back, it's that average. And the thing about that though is that if we don't learn and become aware, because it conditions our mind at a young age, the upbringing, and depending where you are, because there's the matrix and there's all the sub matrices that come underneath, which is the continent that you come from, or the state you live in, the country, the town, the and so forth. It goes all the way down to the individual. And when you look at that, then if for ourselves, if we truly want to share our soul or express our light more, we're going to have to understand how the matrix works so that we can rise above. And in essence, what that does is allows us to express, not be so muted in a sense, because unfortunately the matrix is going to make us all the same. And as a soul, we're not the same. We're all different and unique in our own exact same, in our own ways. And it's one of those things where, since it's not doing this unintentionally, it's just how the vibration works. It relates to the law of association, or you've heard this probably before, a phrase of like three crabs in a barrel or something like that. They say, where if there's three crabs in a barrel and one says, I'm done with this life, I'm hiding out of here, it starts climbing up the wall. The other two crabs are going to pull it back down into that barrel. Why they do this, I share this often. I have no idea why they do this, but it's an interesting phenomenon to see, because now that's what the matrix does to us. If we don't make
when you're trying to break free from it. Yeah. And it's like everyone's trying to pull you back into it. I've experienced that before.
And I used to say this as a kid. I mean, I was like, my early preteen, maybe even my early teenage years. And it was one of those things I used to say, if you don't plan your day, the world's going to plan it for you. Yes. I didn't understand what I was saying then. I didn't understand the depth of that, but it just sounded cool. And so then all of a sudden I look back now, I wrote the book and everything. I'm like, That's exactly true. So it's attending, having that intention of the vibe of where you want to play and be at is going. That's just one of them. There's other things that come in because I guess I said there was a conditioning part. Those are those are like limiting beliefs. Those are what you've experienced in life, thinking this is what life is, and it just becomes so embedded in our subconscious mind that we don't even realize it most of the time, that we're living 95% of our life in autopilot mode.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of, I don't want to say work, because it's not work. You just got to be present,
Yeah, a
and
lot of alignment. Yeah.
a lot of alignment. You got to be in that present moment. But the problem is that we're so not present, that it feels like it's hard work. But really, being in the present moment is our natural way of being. But unfortunately, due to life in general, we have been so thrown off, embellished, or disconnected in so many different ways.
Absolutely. And that's how the subconscious mind works, right? It works through routine, it works through programs, it works through images oftentimes. So, since the day we're born to roughly 6 or 7 years old, we're in those theta state years, right? So we are in those observatory years and we're taking in our environment. We're learning how to function in society, oftentimes by our parents and our teachers at that time. And so, as we go through our life, we are literally living out these programs from our subconscious mind on autopilot until we realize we have to consciously be aware of this, and we have to sit in the now moment and sit in that present and really, kind of consciously observe, where are my programs, coming from, and how can I shift these? And so, what's some advice that you can give to people to help them, shift those programs that we've been taught since, the time we were born?
It's always funny because I work with clients and they'll always be like, "Well, I heard, I'm working. I can't wait to get through my limiting beliefs and all this. When do we get started?" I was like, "I got to figure out your patterns." Yeah, right. Because I'm like, well, we have to figure out what we got to see the patterns that show up because it's subconscious. Like I can. There's maybe some cool techniques I can do to maybe figure out some stuff that's the pressing thing I got to work on. But I'm like, it has to show up, and it comes up in a lot of our triggers. It comes up into things. Sometimes you'll see a pattern of your life in general, because the universe is always trying to help us become more who we truly are, and we have to let go of those things and reprogram or re-choose or put a different create a different story of what life is in general. And it's one of those things where it's always going to present it to us. So it's usually that, or you get really triggered. Sometimes somebody says something that really bothers you, but there's some truth behind that, and that's an open door, and that's where you want to sit and say, okay, well, there's something to this. And for clients, I'll ask a lot of questions, but you want to pay attention to that first, because usually that is something that is that is something deep down, because we create these reactions in these type of ways, triggers for sure. But I like more of the pattern stuff too, because it's like, look at, notice here, like, for example, let's use money for an example. And someone will be like, I've tried everything in the world, I'm doing more. I had a client like this where they're like, I'm making more money, but I'm not making more money. And I said, well, that sounds like a limiting belief there. And they're like, yeah, what does that mean? I'm like, well, your consciousness level is at that price point of, let's say, $50,000. So no matter, you tripled your business, but you're still making $50,000.
Interesting.
And they're like, yeah, why is that happening? I said, well, I go, we can create strategies, but that's not going to get to the root, because then we may be able to move it to 75, but we're not removing the ceiling in general. I'm not here to just remove little ceilings or things at a time to have you incrementally cross. I want to get you to open up and say, I can have abundance. I can go from 75 to 10 million if I wanted to, or 20, or whatever my destiny is, or whatever I'm working towards or vibing at. I'm like, that's the kind of work we'll do. But to answer the question again, just to go back to it, it's just really just pay attention to things that trigger you, because there's something there that you need to heal from. It's a wound. That's why we react in that kind of a way. And it's kind of coming up in that moment for us to really consciously look at. The other thing is just, you can just see what's showing up in your life. What's the stories you're telling yourself? What's the same thing happening to you over and over again? There is the subconscious showing it to you. We're just not taking the time to be present to actually do some self-reflection, to look at it and go, I didn't notice that happens to me. And it's always fascinating when I'm working with a client and we start to do this work, and they'll mention it in one area of their life. And I'm like, it's not just in one area of your life. I go, how about here in a relationship? How about here when it comes to business? How about here when it comes to your health? I'm like, do you notice that same pattern? Holy cow, I didn't realize that. That's self-sabotage. In that case, that's what it was. And I'm like, we gotta unprogram that because you're gonna do it in all areas. And it was just, and then you just see their mind explode. And it's just like, holy cow. So this stuff works. This is how I usually do it when I'm working with clients.
I love that. I love how you brought up triggers. I always joke, I call myself Trigger Tanya. I didn't really sign up for this job, but when I'm working with clients, I am often triggering them, through my approaches. And I'm not doing it to upset them. I'm doing it to figure out where's the root cause of this limited belief, of this loop pattern that you've been on, your whole life. And so I love that you brought that up because that is so crucial. As a society, we want to run from our triggers. We're just like, oh, there's a trigger and I'm going to take off from that, when we really need to consciously, like you said, be more self-aware of our triggers. And I do this often when I'm getting triggered. It's like, I'll kind of sit with it and say, all right, I feel this emotion. Where is this coming from? And where did it start? When's the first time I recognize, this emotion or this situation that came up in my life? And oftentimes I can move through that, on my own, but it's just learning how to be more self-aware, how to be able to observe when we get those triggers that come up, because it's like a trigger is it's like a pressure cooker. So it's like, it's been bubbling in there for a while. And when it's coming to the surface, it's ready to be released. But if we shove that thing back in there, it's just going to play out, like you said, in our relationships, in our financial aspects in our life, in our health. And so it's not like, it's only one aspect or one area in our life. Oftentimes our limited beliefs are kind of blanketing, all the areas in our life. So I really love that. So you talked about, on when I was learning about you, you talked about making more by working less. I want to talk about that because that is definitely, that's my strategy as well, because we've been programmed as a society. I know I was as a kid. You got to work your tail off to make some money. And I know reading your biography, you said the same thing. You kind of grew up in an environment where you felt like you were kind of pushed to do that too. So let's talk about that, because when we work in the quantum field or we're working in energy, that is not the case. We can actually shift that. So what are your thoughts on that, Victor?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, you look in the business world and entrepreneur world, this is what made me become a business coach. This is what it propelled me to go in that direction. I didn't do it full time until 3 years later, but it was one of the things I was like, I was so tired of the bad advice. I mean, there's such bad advice that is given. And I don't mean that in a way here again. And I have to clarify that too, because it's like, billionaires are coming out saying this stuff. You got to work hard. You got to outperform outwork your competition. You got to take action. That's what it's all about. At the end of the day, it's action. Trust me, I'm not saying that doesn't work. Grant Cardone comes out saying that I remember I saw a TikTok video and he was saying this Think and Grow Rich book by Napoleon Hill. He's like, you don't think and just become rich. He goes, you have to take action. That's the only thing that works. Right. Now, here's a guy that's worth $2.6 billion or whatever that net worth of his is. He's doing something right, but there's a different way of doing it. And you can get the same results with all the less struggle, all the less stress, because we're so told so many times you have to grind and hustle, sweat equity. But when you look at nature, and I let nature be my teacher, you look at the universe, you look at the way the body works. It's the law of least effort. It all works the same way. You look at nature, a grass or a weed coming through a crack doesn't have to pound the concrete over and over again. Eventually it cracks. No, all it does is follow wherever the light is. I mean, it's like simple stuff like that, and it just gets where it has to go. People say, well, your heart works 24 hours a day. No, it doesn't work 24 hours a day. If you took the actual working time of your heart, it's 9 hours a day. So your heart rests, 15 hours a day? So, in the universe, again, same thing. So the law of least effort, what it means is what's the least amount of work to get the greatest gain possible. When I first half of my chiropractic career, I was working, I was doing what every chiropractor was told to do. 28 hours a week is roughly where we want to be. For people, they think 28 hours a week is kind of short. They would love to have a work week like that. But there's a lot of physical stress on a chiropractor because it's the small repetitive things we do over and over again that does the most damage to us. Mm-hmm. And so, but I was like, after a while, I'm like, I don't want to work 28 hours a week anymore. I want to be able to shorten that. And I was like, law of least effort, universal laws. I started looking at, I knew this stuff already, but I was like, I'm not putting it in the action. And actually, I didn't really trust it that much. So eventually I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go all in. And I went all in. And I ended up working towards the end only 14 and a half hours a week in my office.
Which is funny because most people, Victor, would think 28 is half of what most people would work, right? So now you're like, no, I'm knocking that belief right out of the park.
Well, I did. And the other thing too is being a pediatric chiropractor was told you have to have weekend hours, you got to work this many days and all this other stuff because you got to accommodate to moms and their schedules. And I get that. I have a newborn. I'm almost 7 weeks old now. And I get it. But at the same token, I was like, but this is how I'm going to practice. And if I'm coming from a place of lack, then yeah, everything they're saying is right. But if I come from a place of abundance and I come from the law of vibration, then I'm creating an office that has these hours. And guess what? I will attract those people to my office that fits my schedule. And you know what? 80, 90%, almost 90% of the time it worked. And I made more and I was working less and I was way less stressed and so much more. And now I teach these things and how to do that. Because we're going against nature. And when we go against nature, you're going to burn yourself out. And that's why I was doing a workshop on this, showing about leadership. From a Forbes magazine talked about how 60% of leadership is burned out. 60%. That's a high number. And it's again, what does it come down to? It's the advice we're being told. We do this force mentality. It's a Newtonian physics. You do this much amount of work, and eventually over a period of time, you get to this point. It's so logical and linear, and life isn't like that. I mean, there's nothing in nature that is like that. Some people say, well, look at, an animal when they fight. I'm like, yeah, that's an animal in this. Let's look at nature itself. Let's look at the earth. Let's look how earth works. Let's look how the universe, or even our own bodies work. It's all the law of least effort. What's the least amount of work to get the greatest gain possible?
Absolutely. And I think for me, I've been really challenging myself to find the balance between doing and being. And when I did that, it was like the sweet spot, and I used to play college basketball. So I look at it as, nature is in a flow state. And when we as humans dive into that flow state too, it's like being in the zone. When I played ball, when I was in the zone, I could not miss a shot, and so I apply that to my daily life now. It's like, ooh, I can feel when I'm in the zone. Things are coming effortless to me. I don't even have to do anything because vibrationally I'm in alignment and I'm a match for that. So you have a concept that is called, what does be, do, have? And why are many people doing that backwards? Because I thought this was very intriguing because like I said, I'm really working to harmonize that doing and being. And it's triggering a lot of people because they're expecting me to do when I'm starting to just kind of balance that out. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I heard this in chiropractic school and it just blew my mind because it was one of these things where when I learned, I remember the speaker was bringing it up and they're just like, hey, there's something called the be, do, have principle. And he goes, most people do the opposite. And then he starts going down examples. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, that's my life. Oh my God, that's everyone I know. That's everything, my upbringing. Holy cow. When I have this money, I can do these things and be this person. When I have this car, I can go drive and enjoy. I can enjoy driving, right? I'm going to do the driving to it or do enjoying of driving. And then I could be this person. And we look, oh, if I have this person in my relationship, then I can do these things and be this person. We're so conditioned, and it's in the matrix. It's how we're conditioned as a world. And then it was like, well, this is the other principle. It's a be, do, have. You have to be the person. And this aligns with the law of vibration. You have to be the person first. And then what happens in the doing is this is where effortless action comes in. Effortless success is what I usually call it. And when I say those things, are like, there's no such thing as effortless success. I'm like, come into my world, I'll show you. Because when you're truly in that vibrational state, the law of inspired action is going to come to you. And what that is, like you're sharing, you get inspired with ideas or circumstances and situations or people just come to you because that's the truth of law of vibration. Law of vibration leads to a law of attraction, which leads to a law of manifestation. So if you're in that vibrational state, let's say $1 million, everyone, money's easy to talk about. So $1 million is where you want to have. Well, if you're in that vibrational state, but in your bank account, it's not there yet, don't worry. All of a sudden the people or you're going to have these ideas coming to you. People are going to come to you and so much more. And it's such an easier way. And I usually share it in another way where if you want to see, or it's in a biblical story of David versus Goliath, that is the law of inspired action.
I love that.
Because if you look at David, what did he do? He just all of a sudden one day he picked up that rock, he threw it, nailed Goliath right where he needed to. That was the end of it. He didn't, and this is kind of when I'm not trying to bash, well, I guess sounds like I am, but like in the business world, what we're kind of told is you pick up the rocks and just keep throwing, and eventually you'll hit that target. And what's the cost of that? How much life do you have to give up? How much of your health are you going to sacrifice? How much of your time, your money, and all these different things? When, excuse me, the same route would have went, or even easier, by just being. I mean, there's ancient like Lao Tzu is one of my. I love Lao Tzu. For those who don't know, he's the creator of Taoism. I've never studied Taoism. I should, just because I love the guy so much. But in his Tao Te Ching that he wrote, in one of his verses, he says that he's like, if you feel like you got to do something with force, then don't do it.
Yeah,
just sit back and relax and know that it'll come to you when you need to. And I'm like, that is so hard for Western civilization to grasp.
Because then the word procrastination comes up, right? And that's a trigger for people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, so that be do have is you be the person first. The doing's going to come to you of what you need to do to get to the point of having. As long as you get the being right, and that's just making sure you focus on your vibe, everything else will come into alignment. And it's one of those things as humans, and this was hard for me in the beginning, because I'm a type A driver personality. So I'm all about set the task. And you play college ball. I played baseball in my life for almost 25 years. And so it was like baseball is very, I just continue to show up. I practice. I focus on the things I'm weak at. I get better at them, and I get better in the game. So you think, okay, that's what I have to do. More work, then I get better results in business. Yeah, that was a tough road to eventually learn that one the opposite, because it took me about 6-7 years in the business to finally go, I think I'm not trusting enough. I think I need to let go. And I remember I did that. It was 2017. I told my wife, she worked with me in the office. We owned the business together. And I remember telling her, I said, I don't want to see the numbers in the office. I don't want to see anything in the office of how we're doing. Just alert me if we get below this number percentage. I just need to know, because I know finances, that could be a good thing for us. I said, other than that, I'm not going to pay attention to anything. I'm just going to show up every day, and that's the end of it. And it was fascinating. Everything took care of itself. We never got down to the danger zone. We actually grew, and I just focused on that being element, who I needed to be. What's the aspect of that being? Got the emotions about visualization, but I saw myself at the office of how I wanted to see it. And that was it. And it just changed everything.
That's fascinating. And I think that, by us aligning energetically first through that visualization, through the emotions of feeling it, the physical will come around. The physical realm is much denser than our energetic realm. So it takes a little bit more time for it to show up. Like you said, you can visualize the $1 million in your mind and how, maybe how you're going to get there, but just visualize yourself receiving, that money, and you may not see it in your bank account, but you will be aligned if you continue to focus on that. And I think sports is easy for me to talk about, because that's, what I'm, worked with in, my whole life. But I would visualize myself. So I set a goal when I was in early high school to be on the team, and I was going to score 1,000 points, by the time I was done with school. Right. Well, everybody thought I was crazy, well, I visualized that, and I visualized myself scoring that 1,000 point, and darn you, I went over 1,000 points. But, for me, that was, I think, my early years understanding what you're talking about the law of vibration, the law of attraction, the law of manifestation, all of these things. But I didn't even know I was doing it at the time until I started to learn about these concepts and then begin to apply them, and, just having a deeper understanding of how our energy does play. It influences us in our physical life. And so, I think all of the topics that you've brought up have been, totally on key, because these are things that we as modern society haven't been taught, but it is a little bit outside of the box. So let's talk a little bit about your book and how, what are some concepts in there that you're sharing with people that you might want to, share today on the show that you think would be of benefit?
Yeah, the first thing I share, and I shared a little bit of how I work with coaching clients, and I was sharing that because I share about how to untap into your potential, and just to share to listeners, you understand a lot. We hear about, unleash your potential or this and that. Well, what is your potential, right? And that's something that, is it infinite? Is it this? Is it that? And in the book, I kind of share this in the sense that share a spiritual truth. What you can see in your mind's eye is what you'll create in your reality. Right? And you can share, there's many ways you can share that phrase has been told. And it's one of the things where I say, if you can see it, then you will have it. You got it, but not see physically. I mean, within yourself, you can see yourself. Let's say you want to have $1 million. If you can truly see that in your mind, you can easily create that. That's your potential, because if you, whatever you can't see within yourself or in your mind's eye or your imagination, you can't create it. You just can't. So a lot of my work, I work with clients, is on vision and creating the vision of the life of what you want to have. And I break that down in a few different ways. One is the end goal of, like, let's say you're passing away, you got this eulogy being told. What they're going to say, are you living your life that way? That's a reality check. Number one, am I living my life in that way? Number two, do I like what they're saying? And can I add more to it? Because a lot of times, like, oh, I love them to say this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, but what else would you want? Well, I would love to have this. I would love to have that. I love that. I love that, these be remembered for those things. Okay, let's make that a vision. How do we create that as a vision? And then when you start to do those kind of things, then you want to get into the power of visualization. I cannot tell you the science that's coming through about the power of visualization in the last 10, 15 years has been mind boggling. I mean, we're talking, I'm a chiropractor. In the first year and a half of my career or my school, we go to school just like medical doctors do. And so, we learn a lot of biology, we learn all these different things. And it's kind of fascinating. I'm very open-minded. So it's kind of fascinating for me when we can use the power of visualization to not need, I shouldn't say, let me take this back. So we can use the power of visualization to grow muscles without working out. Absolutely. I'm not saying that you should do that, but I'm just saying, based on, there was a study done that they looked at those who did versus those who did it, and then those who visualized.
And even Dr. Emoto's work with the water molecules, focusing the visualization of the water from love to fear, Yeah.
And I love his work. I share it in my book, his work, and I've shared him in multiple books actually of his work, because it's just fascinating stuff of seeing, just again, when some people say, well, this law of vibration or this and that, that's woo-woo stuff. Well, not really. Look at the work of Dr. Emoto with the water. Look at Dr. David Hawkins' work with power versus force. Yes. And I share stories about how I did it, but the power of visualization is one of the biggest things that we want to get back to. I kind of share this a lot about, we need to learn to be kids again. That will change your life if you can learn to be a kid again. Because when you look at children, especially around 3, 4 years old, man, their imagination is so wild, so cool. They're at such a state where the things they think of and what comes up and how excited they get, they're not judging and saying, well, there's so-and-so's not going to like that, so I don't want to do that. They're just like, I want to do it. I want to be in stuff, because their left brain doesn't fully it doesn't fully develop until 12, 13 years old, but it starts taking over at age 2, and that's the focus of building that up. That's that logic, that's reasoning, and looking at ego and all those things. But 3, 4 years old, it hasn't had enough time to kick in fully. And so it's going back to being children and being more imaginative of what gets you excited. It's a game changer. If I can get more people just to imagine things of what they like to see in their life and get excited about that and stay in that field and that vibration as much as they possibly can, you will master manifestation. You will master the law of attraction, because that's you're elevating your vibe, and you can control that. And I share a lot of that in the book of that's how we can truly unleash our potential and so forth.
Yeah. And so what advice do you have for the people that say, I can't visualize, I have a hard time visualizing? I get that a lot from my clients. Is there anything you can share to help people relearn almost how to visualize again? Like you said, as children, we're so imaginative. Where did we lose that as adults?
Yeah, tell me about it. One of the things sometimes if someone can't visualize, some people are not as vision.
Visual?
Well,
yeah.
Vision. I want to say visionary. So, what I'll tell them then is journal if you can. Just journal. And sometimes like, well, I don't know what to write then. Okay, well, look in a magazine and see something that interests you. You like try to pull images. So watch a movie and see if there's a character that you like. There's so many ways. It doesn't have to come from us. We can just see it. That's how I was as a kid. Like I did a lot of imagination stuff, and then I just watched movies. Like I would watch Saved by the Bell, and I remember Slater was the guy who I wanted to be like. So he had the muscles and all that stuff. So I was like, that's who I see myself being when I'm in high school. I'm gonna have muscles. I'm gonna have that. Well, you better believe it. It happened just like that. Some will say, well, you have the genetics, but I was interested in working out. Why did it happen at the moment when I started working out at such a certain age? So by the time I got into high school, I had the muscles and everything. I didn't have them at 13 years old. I had them at 15. So it's just interesting, but you can pull from other characters and let that try to, inspire you, and just take a moment and just sit and relax, do some, a lot of times when people can't do this kind of work, they're just too stuck in the past or present, in the future. And so this is where we got to pull tools into getting you resetting. I call it resetting your nervous system, or centering it back to the where is our more optimal state. And so like meditation, but that can stress somebody out.
Yeah.
Well, then I always go, I always recommend to start off with is breath work. Now there's thousands, there's like 12, 15 different types that I can think off the top of my head. But breath work is really powerful to do, because what happens is you have a part of your brain called in the midbrain that is called the breath pacemaker. And what this does is it actually is always monitoring your breath and sending the signals throughout the body to be aware of. And this is why when you get angry or you have anxiety, your respiratory goes higher. And so what you can do is, if you slow down the breathing, it actually changes the tone of your nervous system and it'll calm it down. Now, research shows all you need is 6 very deep breaths from the stomach. So you breathe in, your stomach expands, you hold for a second and then breathe out. You do that 6 times, you'll be calmer. I recommend 10. I just like to go a little longer, just in somebody wants to cheat it or cut corners. But when you calm that nervous system, there's going to be a moment where you can start to shift to another part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, and you can get into these other centers of your brain to where you can start to make that connection to try to get imaginative. And so it's not going to happen overnight. Neurology doesn't change overnight. Some research shows it takes up to 84 days to make a change in your brain. So it's one of those things that this takes time, and just be patient with yourself. If you haven't done this in a while, we're not like kids. I always look back. I'm like, man, I wish I could daydream like I was when I was in school. Because I would go off. I mean, I do it in like certain things like meditating. I can get into the state, and then all of a sudden I'm like gone. And then I'll come back. And I'm like, man, where the heck did I just go? That was cool. So I can do it there, but I can't do it like I used to do as a kid. Just sit there and just daze off and then come back and be like, wow, man, that was a cool journey where I was at. Look at the story I was playing. But I'm working towards it. I'm getting better at it, where I can hook onto a story and then like get caught into the story, which I'm like, all right, this is what I kind of want to do. And that's not that. So it takes time. It's something that you want to build into. But so journaling, pick a character out, watch a movie, watch a show, someone that you like, someone that inspires you, or just it could be someone that, I know there's programming in there, and there's all this conditioning with that kind of stuff. But again, I'm trying to just get you to start seeing it, seeing what that person is, and like, man, I would love to be like that type of a person. Great. Now you have something you can reference to. And now you can start using that in your own visualizations. Think of that person. Think of what that is. Think of what that looks like. And eventually over time, you don't need to think about the person anymore. You'll just think about yourself and that person.
That's fantastic advice. I was one of those who had a hard time visualizing, but I could feel with the best of them. I could feel what it felt like to have $1 million. I could feel what it felt like to do this. And so sound has been very beneficial for me. I would wear headphones. I'd listen to binaural beats or solfeggio frequencies, and I would notice that in my mind's eye, I would begin to start to see colors and certain things. And that really kind of fine-tuned my visualization. It's just like anything you want to do, a hobby, a sport, a creative, project. You want to practice it in order to get good at it. And I think visualization is the same way. Yes, as kids, we were amazing visualizers, but they would be like, stop daydreaming. What's wrong with you? So we were programmed to kind of shut that off in our mind. And now as adults, we're going back to, you say, okay, well, how do we get back to that childlike visionary that we were? And I love the advice that you share, because it doesn't always have to be within us. We can look outside of us and say, okay, I see that person, or I see that person in the movie, and I want to do that. I want to be like that. And I've done that a lot in my life. I've watched something. For example, when I worked at the hospital, at the Pediatric, I worked in Daytona Beach. I wanted to get a NASCAR driver to come over to the hospital to talk to the kids. Well, I told people at my work, and they thought I was bonkers, they're like, you're never going to get a NASCAR driver over there. What's wrong with you? I did not take no as an answer. Well, within a year, I had that NASCAR drive over there. And not only was he going to the pediatric unit, I had him going around the whole hospital with me, sharing a story because his mom was a kidney donor and I was working in transplantation at that time. And so, it was funny to look back. And then I was like, every April was donation month. And I was like, I'm lighting that tower green at the top of the hospital, on the top. And they're like, you can't make that happen. Well, not only did I make that happen, I made it happen across the entire county. So, I do think when we visualize those things, and we speak those things out, like, because our thoughts are electric, our emotions are magnetic. And then when we speak it, it's amplifying it and broadcasting it. But not to speak, when you speak it out and then people start to shut you down, don't listen to that, don't listen to them doing that. And I think that was my whole life. I've never really let that play in, but I know a lot of people do. A lot of people take, what other people say as their limited belief and then take it on. So is there any advice you can give people around those topics, around listening to others?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's I always tell people, never tell your dreams or what you want to do with friends and family. And it comes off harsh, but those are most of the time going to be the people, not always, and they're not doing it out of hate or anything, but like you're sharing limiting beliefs, they're just going to share their limiting beliefs with you, and they're going to try to get at you. This happened to me as a chiropractor when I was first coming out. I mean, I graduated in 2009, and 2008 was the Rock October. We were in a recession, and I had chiropractors like, you have to work in groups. Nobody's going on their own anymore. Blah 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 blah. Right? These are all, and I was like, those are all limiting beliefs. Like, you're sharing me your limiting beliefs with me. That's your world, not mine. And, then I went off on my own and did it. But it's one of those things where you have to really, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to this. Do you really believe and have the faith within yourself to create it, or you don't? Mm-hmm. That's what it's going to be. Because if you really do, you don't even care about what someone else says. Like, you're not going to have the green light. Okay, great. I've had that before. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. Okay, great. We'll see. And
like, it almost gives me a push to do it.
And I used to be that way. I used to be like, the best, sweetest revenge is success. So I would try to do that. But then eventually I was like, I got to a point where I'm like, but then without that, then I need some sort of outside stimulant. And I'm like, dang, I got caught in that trap. Exactly. I was like, okay, I got to start looking in more. But it just becomes that thing where it's like, it really is just having the faith within to know you can create it. That's all you need. And it's not faith as like religious or like hope. It is inner knowing that you're going to do that. Like, you saw it in your head, like, I see it. It's going to happen. There's going to be a green light on top of that hospital, right? I saw myself, even though people were telling me I wouldn't be, I had to do this or that in order to be successful in some way as a chiropractor because of the times. I was like, no, I see myself being successful, and it wasn't a smooth road. I mean, I took detours, but I needed to learn in that process to get to the certain level I got to. Because when I look back, I'm like, oh, that makes sense why that happened. Oh, I can see why that happened. Oh, wow, that's so, man, I never saw that being that. Holy cow. Because life doesn't make sense unless you look through the rearview mirror looking at it. And it was one of those things where, you take that aspect of it and just know that this is why, if you can see it in your mind's eye, that's your potential. And then you just have to have the faith to know you can create it. There's other things you can add to the mix, but those are like the two most simplistic things to do to really create amazing, I won't say crazy, just a wildly amazing life that you could look back and go, I'm so blessed to be here. It's so amazing. And it's been so much different in some ways of how you got there, but the fulfillment's going to definitely be there.
Absolutely. And like, I sometimes, with the Matrix analogy, with those around me, I look at them all like Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith is the one who's trying to keep Neo and Trinity in the Matrix. And I'm like, my friends and family are Mr. Smiths right now, and you are not going to hold me back. And so it's like, when people say, oh, open up a new chapter, I'm like, oh, no, I'm writing a whole new book. It's like, I look back at my 20s, my 30s, and then now it's like I have a different book for each decade of my life. And and who says you can't do that? Who says you can't change who you are? And I think those are just our limited beliefs that stand in our way. And so, Victor, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I think we touched on some really awesome topics. So if people want to reach out to you, what's a good way for them to contact you if they want to book a session or get your book? How can they contact you?
No, thanks. Thank you for this. Yeah, my hub is my website. So empoweryourreality.com. If you like what I was sharing, you want to get on a call, I do a free discovery call. It's right on the main top of the page, and there's a bunch of buttons all over to do that. My book is all over Amazon. You can find any book selling online. It's available at for the most part. And then if you're on social media and you want to connect with me, on the bottom left of my website, I'm on 4 places: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. I share about 5-6 videos a week on something relating to mindset, spirituality, money, those kind of elements on how we can elevate our life in some aspect or another. So if you have questions on anything I talked about, please reach out, DM me on social media. I do read my messages. I do reply and so forth. I love hearing from people. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Victor. If any of you out there want to decode your matrix, check out his book. And I thank you so much for coming on today. And I send everybody such good, uplifting, positive energy. And you can change your reality. You can change your life. So thank you so much for coming on, Victor.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.